I'm James Rosone.
And I'm Miranda Watson. We're the husband and wife writing team that created the military thriller Monroe Doctrine series and the military sci-fi series The Rise of the Republic.
We have some additional content we'd like to share with you guys today, and we hope you'll find it informative and entertaining. We're planning to create more videos similar to this in the future.
As always, please like, share, and subscribe. Now let's get started.
Chapter 40. Clear the Road. May 1991. 1st Brigade, 82nd Airborne Tutsi. Al-Mazari, Saudi Arabia. The 1st Brigade had made a successful parachute assault on the port area. Only scattered enemy contact had been made, and so the brigade had pushed out reconnaissance elements to scout the road to Tabuk. The locals were assisting the soldiers in any way that they could, which made the chain of command a bit worried that the soldiers might get too relaxed. Just after landing and using local transportation, Colonel Kinzer had met with the mayor of Al-Mazari, 16 miles south of the port at the intersection of the highway to Tabuk and Jeddah. "Hey, sir, Checkpoint 1 just reported meeting up with a couple of Sheridans accompanying the 2nd Brigade," Command Sergeant Major Hill reported. "About time they rolled in here. Tell the S3 to notify the 1st of the 325th that they can return to 2nd Brigade's control and see if he can get Colonel Allen over here to meet with me, or I'll go there. Wherever he sets the meeting up," Colonel Kinzer directed. 2 hours later, Kinzer and Allen were sitting in overstuffed chairs, sipping tea in the Marsa Diba Hotel, where the Emir of Dubai had secured rooms for them. In fact, he'd secured the entire hotel for the U.S. commanders. "How was the trip from Jeddah?" Kinzer asked. "Long and slow," Allen replied. "The highway was fine. It was all the engineer equipment we brought that was slowing us up. I have an entire reinforced road construction battalion at the end of the column that we're moving up front right behind a screen force so we can get the road to Tabuk opened," Allen replied. "Nah, I took the liberty of pushing some reconnaissance folks in civilian vehicles that the locals gave us. They went about 40 miles up the road before they hit a major landslide in a very narrow pass," Kinzer said. "Yeah, that's what we've got to clear to get the supply convoys through. I also have a quartermaster battalion coming up that will continue on to the port to start offloading ships," Allen said, taking another sip. "Already started. The first ship came in yesterday and left this morning. They have a great area for offloading and a yard for storage." "Great. Then as soon as we get the road open, we can get supplies moving to Tabuk. That'll make Peters happy," Allen indicated. "Yeah, then maybe we can get out of here and join Irons," Kinzer commented. "Colonel, this battalion makes roads. We do not move mountains. Half of that mountain is in that pass, and it would take more explosives than we're carrying to move it. At that, it'll be 2 weeks before I could put a path through that mess," Lieutenant Colonel Bullock explained in frustration. Colonel Allen wasn't buying it. "We don't have 2 weeks to get these supplies through. We're wasting time when you could be working on that rock pile," Allen argued. "Look, sir, give me 24 hours to find a way around this pass and make a road for you," Bullock said. "Don't you think the Iraqi 14th Division thought of that and didn't do it?" Allen responded with, "Sir, the 14th was getting its ass kicked with airstrikes when they attempted to come through there. I bet we'll find a junk pile of destroyed vehicles when we get around there, and none will be engineer equipment." "Give me 24 hours, sir," Bullock almost pleaded. "All right, you got 12 to tell me you found a way and another 12 to have it passable to vehicles. Doesn't have to be pretty, just functional," Allen agreed in frustration. Sergeant First Class Hagenbach loved his work. He was a surveyor, and surveying roads was his job. It was a job that kept him and his team away from the flagpole with no one looking over his shoulder. He also liked the fact that he would retire from the Army at age 37 with a 50% retirement check and still be young enough and experienced enough to get a good job with a civilian road construction company. Sweet, he thought. "All right, guys, let's get off this road and try going up this wadi to see if we can get around the roadblock," Hagenbach said to his 8-man team, riding in 2 Humvee vehicles. He folded his map, and everyone began to move back to their respective vehicles. It didn't take that many to survey a route, but to survey a route in Indian country with hostiles about, Hagenbach wanted security. While Hagenbach navigated off his map, his driver, Private Ford, attempted to avoid the deep ruts and larger rocks in the wadi. Even with careful driving, the ride was anything but smooth. "Sarge, this is, what, the fourth wadi we've been up that we've had to turn around because it went nowhere?" Ford commented. "Now see, that's where you're wrong, Private Ford," Hagenbach said. He always prefaced a soldier's name with the soldier's rank. "How so, Sergeant?" Ford asked, as the left front wheel dropped into another hole. "You see, Private Ford, every wadi we've been in leads to some place. However, none of them lead to where we want to go. All these wadis go someplace. It's just a matter of us finding the right wadi. Be patient and have a little faith," Hagenbach said, looking over at Ford. "Oh, I have faith, Sarge. Faith that we're going to get so far and turn around to look up another wadi," Ford said, as he attempted to miss a large rock. Hagenbach buried his head in his map, looking to see if there was a branch off this wadi that might prove successful. He was lost in thought when his concentration was broken by Ford. "Holy shit," Ford mumbled, causing Hagenbach to look up. "Damn, I don't believe it," Hagenbach said, looking out the front window of the vehicle. Before him was a junkyard of burnt, broken, and destroyed vehicles rounding out the entire inventory of Iraqi combat vehicles. There was also the stench of burnt and decaying bodies. Off to the left was a paved road disappearing into a pass. Ford stopped the vehicle, and Hagenbach got out and stood next to it. The other vehicle pulled up behind him. Everyone got out, just mesmerized by the scene in front of them. Finally, Hagenbach snapped out of it and got things organized. "All right, there's no need to break out the survey equipment. The road is going to follow this wadi. Specialist Anderson, I want you to drop a flag at every turn in the wadi as we head back. You should have enough. Specialist Moore, when he drops a flag, you shoot a compass heading back to the previous flag. Call it out, and Sergeant Jameson, you plot it. Any questions?" Hagenbach asked. "What are you going to do, Sarge?" Anderson asked. "Specialist Anderson, I am going to do what a sergeant first class in the Army is supposed to do," Hagenbach answered. "Which is?" Sergeant Moore asked. "Supervise your work, scrutinize the work to make sure it's done properly, criticize if it's not done properly, and ostracize you when the project is done. Now let's move." "Colonel, the engineer road builder is here to see you," Command Sergeant Major Colburn said, disturbing Colonel Allen's sleep. Sitting up from his prone position on the ground, Allen saw the lieutenant colonel approaching with a nonchalant look. Hell, it's only been 8 hours. He better not be throwing his hands up already, Allen thought. "Sorry to disturb you, Colonel," Lieutenant Colonel Bullock apologized. "Well, what is it now?" Allen said, ready for an argument. "Well, sir, I was wondering when you wanted to get this convoy rolling again," Bullock said. "What the hell are you talking about?" Allen retorted, confused. "Sir, we have a road mapped out that goes around this mess and puts us back on the highway. I have some EOD folks out right now clearing the last of some unexploded ordnance at the end, but with headlights on and chem sticks, the road around is clearly marked. I thought you would want to know." "So how soon do you want to be rolling?" Bullock asked, truly enjoying himself as Allen rose in a fluster. 15 minutes later, the convoy was rolling slowly through the wadi and heading to Tabuk. Chapter 41. Eye in the Sky. 1 May 1991, Pentagon, basement level, Arlington, Virginia. The satellite had just made a second pass and confirmed to those watching that the Iraqi forces were pulling back to Kuwait. It appeared that 2 divisions were moving back towards King Khalid Military City, following a trail of broken toys of the 7th Medina Division and the 5th Baghdad Division. 1 division was still in Riyadh, and remnants of 4 divisions were moving north across the open desert, bypassing Al-Hofuf. Their paths across the desert were marked with black smoke clouds of burning vehicles and trails of dust marking their progress. 3 and possibly 4 divisions could be seen in defensive positions south of the Kuwait border. "So, Paige, what's your assessment of this?" Cliff Jeffrey asked. "I think it's pretty clear that he's withdrawing back to Kuwait," she said. "Yeah, but why? What does he gain by pulling back into Kuwait? What's the one big advantage that this gives him?" Bob Daly asked out loud. "Well, it shortens his supply lines for one," Paige answered. "It puts him closer to his air support," Cliff said, studying the computer screen. "There has to be something more to get him to withdraw this far back. I don't think we've hurt him bad enough yet to cause a total withdrawal. He's leaving this one division in Riyadh, it appears. Is he going to make the city a rubble pile with street fighting?" Daly asked. "Wait one. What's the status of his air defense weapons? Have we found any SA-300s as of yet? And how much of Kuwait is covered by the SA-2 and 3 batteries? He could be attempting to get his people under an air defense umbrella. His air force has lost so many aircraft they're almost ineffective at keeping our guys off the ground force's backs," Paige commented. "Let's look at what he has for air defense weapons." She grabbed a 3-ring binder off an adjacent desk. Flipping through pages, she found what she was looking for. Okay, he has SA-2, SA-3, SA-6, SA-8, SA-9, and SA-10. The SA-2 were Vietnam vintage and have an altitude of 82,000 feet and a range of 45 kilometers. These are generally easy to spot because they'll have the 6 launchers in a circular pattern with the radar in the center. However, in the open desert, with camouflage applied, they may not be as easy to spot as they were in Vietnam. They're considered a strategic weapon, so we should find these around major cities such as Baghdad, Paige said. "What about around oil fields?" Bob asked. "I doubt it. They know we won't strike an oil field," Cliff stated. "Not unless he was protecting the launchers by placing them in an oil field, knowing we would be worried about hitting the oil wells," Bob interjected. "I hadn't thought of that. We best be looking in the Ramadi oil fields to see if there are any there," Cliff directed. "Okay, Paige, what's next?" The SA-3, which we saw in Vietnam as well, is mobile or fixed-based, has a range of 22 miles and an altitude of 59,000 feet. Paige read off the information page. "Being mobile, they could be about anywhere, but again, I think we'll find these around more important targets such as the naval bases, supply depots, and fuel storage areas. Again, if they are around the refineries, I think it's more to protect them than to guard the refinery," Cliff concluded. "All the rest are mobile and generally are found at the corps and division levels oriented in low-flying aircraft," Paige continued. "In fact, the SA-10 is primarily an anti-helicopter air defense weapon and highly mobile." "What about the SA-5? Bob asked. "Nope, Iraq isn't known to have those," Paige indicated, going down the list. "And we suspect that the SA-300 will be in Iraq, around Baghdad." "Okay, folks," Cliff said, looking up from the list that Paige had just scanned. "We need to make locating air defense a high priority on the next passes. If we can identify his system's locations and plot out fans of coverage, it may give us a better picture of where he's pulling his forces back to and why. You can almost bet that where his SAM coverage is located, he won't be flying his own aircraft there. Might give our people a better idea of where they can expect any air attack to approach from." Chapter 42. 24th gets the prize. Thurius, 3rd May 1991, 3rd of the 69th Armor, Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. The engagement with the 6th Iraqi Armored Division was violent and long. The 24th committed all 3 brigades of tanks and Bradley fighting vehicles, as well as attack helicopters. The 6th Iraqi Armored Division didn't hold back and committed all their T-72 tanks, BMPs, and Mi-24 Hind helicopters. In the end, the superior capabilities of the American equipment won out over the Iraqi numbers. After 24 hours of fighting, even through the night with the Americans' advantage in night optics and thermal sights, the battlefield was a graveyard of burning and broken vehicles, as well as bodies. Comparatively, the 24th had few casualties, But regrettably, several soldiers had been killed in a fratricide engagement, a case of miscommunications and direction. When the 369 Armor moved westward, they approached Prince Sultan Military Airfield cautiously 2 days ago. Lieutenant Colonel Altemeyer was told that this had been the central control facility for the Iraqi Air Force once they'd invaded Saudi Arabia, but that it had been heavily bombed when the offensive to take back Saudi Arabia had begun. As the battalion rolled up on the perimeter fence, it became obvious that it had in fact been extensively bombed. The runways had several large craters, and most of the hangars were destroyed, with Iraqi frog-footer aircraft still inside. Most of the billets were also destroyed. 3 Hawk air defense launchers were piles of junk scattered around the outer perimeter. Altamir knew that this airfield wasn't going to be operational anytime soon, but it wasn't his problem. Passing through Prince Sultan Military Airfield, the battalion rolled through Najran on their march to Riyadh. They hadn't encountered any combat Iraqi forces, but were being slowed down by the number of rear-echelon Iraqi soldiers they were policing up. Each group would have to be collected, searched, and held until another force could take responsibility for the prisoners. Generally, it was a military police unit that had several cattle trucks and was just loading prisoners in them. Thankfully, the prisoners didn't offer any resistance or cause any trouble. Local Saudi residents demonstrated mixed emotions. Some waved, children darted between the vehicles as soldiers tossed candy to them. Old men just stood on the side of the road with their arms behind their backs and just stared at the Americans. Women in their all-black attire scurried along, not acknowledging the Americans. As far as the soldiers were concerned, that was good, as the women in black gave the soldiers an uneasy feeling. The one group Altamir was not seeing was young men. It made him wonder. The small group had been moving west ever since the first night of the battle. Their regiment had been chewed to pieces before the battle was even an hour old. They watched their company commander, Captain Bouzizi, crawl out of his vehicle and roll to the ground, but they couldn't get to him due to the intense automatic weapons fire. They didn't see anyone else exit the burning vehicle. Their own vehicles had also been killed, but Allah had allowed these 5 to survive. They didn't know how or why, but were thankful to him for allowing it to happen. Lieutenant Arif al-Jaziri had been a platoon leader. Now he led 4 other men, hopefully to safety. They had seen others walking towards the Americans with their hands held high, waving white flags, but they weren't convinced that this would be better than getting back to their division headquarters. Entering Al-Kharj, they found a smoldering ruin that had once been a command post. MG Parshan Faizan was present, but not alive. Colonel Ghaffar was also present and in a state of shock as far as Lieutenant Al-Jaziri could tell. It appeared that they had been abandoned by the rest of the division headquarters staff. "Colonel Ghaffar, what happened?" Lieutenant Al-Jaziri asked, squatting down in front of the man, who was sitting on the floor with his back to a wall. Noticing the colonel's cracked lips, Al-Jaziri offered him a drink of water. The colonel drank as if he was addicted to water. "We got a report that the Americans were withdrawing, and the general wanted to press the attack. I cautioned him, but he ordered a full attack. It was then that the American artillery and rockets began hitting our position. I think they may have been listening to your radio transmissions and found us that way. We thought we were safe, that they would not dare fire artillery on a Saudi town," Colonel Ghaffar lamented. Sergeant Ibrahim Kadar entered the room with 2 other soldiers. "Sir," he addressed the lieutenant, "we have found a vehicle that Private Sadar has running. We should be going in quickly." "All right, help me with the colonel, and let's head to Riyadh," the lieutenant said, standing and assisting the colonel in doing the same. Walking as if intoxicated, the colonel was assisted to the Toyota pickup truck and placed in the back, while Lieutenant Al-Jaziri took the passenger seat. "Private Najm, head to Riyadh and disregard the speed limits," Al-Jaziri said, pointing towards the front of the vehicle. "Power elements, power 6. Colonel Altamir called over the command radio net. Each company commander responded in order to acknowledge that they were listening. Power elements. It appears that the Iraqi division that was in Riyadh is bugging out. They're moving to the north, it appears. Command doesn't want a firefight in the city, so we're going to hold at Al-Hair. Alpha is to move to the northeast and secure the prison. When you get there, give me an update on the condition and number of prisoners there. Check to see if any American or Allied prisoners are being held there. Bravo. Take up a position between the prison complex and the town. Charlie, you take the northern part of the town and Delta the southern part. See if all the Iraqi forces have pulled out. We'll stay on this highway and peel off to enter the town from the east and move through it to the west. I want you to take up positions along the river. Any questions? Altamir concluded. There were none. Delta dogs were tail-end Charlie in the column of armored vehicles, and Lieutenant Bagel's platoon was the last of the column. Some days that could be good, and some days not so good. Dog 1-1, Dog 1-4. It was the last vehicle in the column and Bagel's fourth tank. Dog 1-4, what's up? Dog 1-1, I got a white Toyota pickup coming up fast behind me. Permission to traverse my turret 180? Over, the tank commander asked. Normally, tanks would travel with every other tank having their main gun pointed to the opposite side of the road from the vehicle in front, but not a complete reverse turret with the gun pointed over the engine compartment. Roger, permission granted. Stop him if you can. It may be a panicked civilian trying to get his favorite loving sheep to the vet, Bagel joked. Off-color jokes about the Arab men and their sheep were very common among the Allied troops. As the last tank turned his turret 180 degrees from the line of march, the Toyota continued to close the distance at high speed, but was still over a mile behind the tank. The dust from the tanks made it difficult to see the Toyota clearly, and for the Toyota to see the tanks clearly. Lieutenant, Private Najim said, shaking the doxing officer awake. What? Are we there yet? Al-Jaziri asked, attempting to remove the sleep from his eyes. No, sir, but there's a column of tanks and vehicles ahead. They fade in and out in the dust they are creating, Private Najim said. Good, let's speed up and join them, Al-Jaziri ordered, and the good private pressed the accelerator to the floor. The Toyota pickup still had a lot of life in it and increased speed significantly. So did the dust blowing across the road, masking signs and other vehicles. Occasionally, Al-Jaziri would catch a glimpse of an armored vehicle through the dust as they raced to catch up to the column. Stop! Al-Jaziri screamed. Private Najim slammed on the brakes, throwing everyone in the back against the cab. Al-Jaziri was looking down the barrel of an American M1 Abrams tank 50 meters in front of him. Sergeant Bowman had been a gunner on the tank for only a year, and in the last 3 weeks had had more gunnery practice with live targets than most senior non-coms sitting back in the States. Looking through his gun sight with the thermal imaging capability, he had been watching this pickup truck barreling towards him. Could this guy be a suicide bomber? He considered. Hey, Sergeant Rollins, this guy is coming fast. I doubt if he can really see us in our dust, but he's coming fast, Bowman said. Spivey, stop the vehicle, Rollins ordered the driver as he turned in the commander's hatch and looked over the back of the tank. He couldn't see anything initially in the dust trail that they had left. As the dust cleared, he caught a glimpse of the white Toyota. Bowman, don't get trigger-happy. This might be some guy with a wife and kids, Rollins said as they sat and watched the dust clear. I think he just hit his brakes, Bowman said as Najim came to an abrupt halt. Well, hello, Mohammed, Rollins said softly, recognizing the Iraqi army uniforms the passengers were. Guys, I think we just captured a few prisoners, Rollins said over the intercom as he waved the pickup truck forward, the main gun still pointed at the truck. Private, drive very slowly. I think the war is over for us, Al-Jaziri said with resignation. Chapter 43. Move to Riyadh. 6 May 1991. CENTCOM HQ, Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. General Schwarzkopf was anxious to get CENTCOM displaced from Oman to Saudi Arabia. Arkant and Marchant had displaced earlier to Abu Dhabi and Dubai, but not CENTCOM. Schwarzkopf wanted to lead from the front, and sitting back in Oman was not his cup of tea. The Iraqi forces had barely left Riyadh when the first headquarters elements began arriving. Even the king would be returning shortly, which Schwarzkopf recommended against as the Iraqi Air Force was still operating, ineffectively, but they could get lucky. "Bob, get General Powell on the phone for me, please," Schwarzkopf asked his aide. A few minutes later, the aide indicated that General Powell would be on the phone shortly. "Morning, General," Schwarzkopf said when Powell answered. "Afternoon, Norm. Or is it evening there? I can't keep it straight. How are things there?" "Well, I can tell you Riyadh is a mess. What wasn't nailed down, the Iraqis stole. The royal palace has been trashed, and I recommend that the king stay in Spain until they get that place squared away. That'll also keep him out of my hair for a bit longer," Norm said. "I'll talk to Baker about it and see if he can convince the king to hold off for a bit. What's the tactical situation?" "Right now, Distinct Airborne has taken Tabuk and is mopping up remnants of the Noku Iraqi Corps. The 2nd Iraqi Infantry Division hauled out before they got there and is heading back towards Iraq, along with the Toned Corps headquarters. The road from the seaport to Tabuk is open, so our supplies are flowing from the seaport to Tabuk, and the airport at Tabuk is now operational. We aren't moving any Air Force assets there yet, just cargo is flowing into there," Schwarzkopf said. "How did the 2 National Guard divisions do, the 28th and 29th? Powell inquired. "They did good. Chased the remnants of the 7th and 37th Iraqi divisions back to Tabuk and right into the 101st, which was leapfrogging FOBs and engagement areas. I tell you, those Apache helicopters are eating these guys for breakfast, but they require a lot more maintenance support than what we had with the old Cobra gunships. There are some lessons learned here as far as maintenance requirements in this environment. The sand is eating rotor blades on all the aircraft. The logisticians have raised the flag already back here. I told them to send whatever you need and we'd sort it out after this is over." "Good. So how's the rest of the operation going?" Powell asked. 7 Corps has taken Riyadh, which you knew, and is moving northwest, clearing out the area between Riyadh and Buraydah. They're finding only scattered elements of the IV Iraqi Corps left behind. That's becoming a problem with the number of prisoners we've taken in. We're turning them over to the Saudis for safekeeping. The Saudis have built a huge POW compound south of Harad. No fencing, but there's no place to take off to either. No water holes except at the compound. They're just dropping them in the middle of the desert, giving them a Haji tent and that's it. They're feeding them and have set up a field hospital and latrines. We have a medical unit there to treat the people. Otherwise, I think we'd have the Red Cross or Red Crescent breathing down my neck. The Saudis signed on to the Geneva Convention, and as best as my people can tell, they're following it," General Schwarzkopf explained. "That's good. We certainly don't need any bad press on that subject." "You're right. But the Iraqis aren't a signatory to Protocol 1 or 2, and they're considering this an internal conflict, Arab to Arab. That removes some protection to the people of Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, by their interpretation." "Have you seen some evidence of violations?" "Some units are reporting that young men are missing from towns that we're liberating. Locals tell them that the Iraqis rounded them up and took them when they pulled out. Might be attempting to conscript them into the Iraqi army. We'll just have to wait and see about this." "Okay. How goes it with the other forces?" Powell asked. "The Marines have secured a line along Highway 522 between Riyadh and Al-Hofuf. The 3 Corps has secured Al-Hofuf and has pushed his host task forces as far north as Bukaik. They're going to clear out Dammam, trying to keep our guys out of the cities and let the host nation forces clear them out. Didn't have a choice when it came to Riyadh, but things went well, and the guys are respectful of the situation." "So where are you going from here?" Powell asked. "My weather guys tell me that tomorrow, and for the next 48 hours, we're going to have one of the damn dust storms rolling through on the east side here. That will shut down everything for 48 hours. If you've never been in one of these things, believe me, you're missing nothing. That's going to cover the Iraqis pretty good, and I suspect they'll continue to push getting back to Kuwait. We'll hold in place for that time. Let everyone get some rest, if it's possible in those conditions, then we'll push on. Looking at having the Siftimite Airborne swing into Iraq on the west side of Kuwait. Have 7 Corps do likewise, linking up with airborne elements and driving into the northern part of Kuwait. Have 3 Corps and the Marines come in on the south side, with 3 Corps host nation forces taking Kuwait City. That's the plan right now. My question for you is, what's my final objective? I've been asking that question since the start of this thing, and I'm still waiting for an answer. I'd like to have it before we get to Kuwait. Otherwise, I'm planning on Baghdad as my final objective. Now wait one, Norm. You can't just go charging into Iraq, Powell said. Well then, give me my final objective. Okay, I'll get with Cheney and the president and get you an answer. Anything else? Powell asked. No, that's about it. Keep the supplies coming. I'll give you a call in a couple of days, but get me an answer to the million-dollar question, Schwarzkopf said, and hung up the phone. Chapter 44. Blinded. 7 May 1991. 1st of the 3rd Aviation Regiment, Udayliya, Saudi Arabia. The attack battalion had been covering the 1st Cavalry Division since it had arrived in the Middle East, deploying out of Fort Hood right along with the 1st Cavalry Division. The division was on the west side of Al-Hofuf, between the city and the Marine Division on the left flank. The 1-3 Aviation Regiment was a battalion of attack helicopters sitting on the abandoned airfield at Udayliya. Unfortunately, there were no hangars for the aircraft, but there was one building for the crews. A short distance to the east was a complex that the support personnel had taken over for shelter. The unit had been racking up the hours flying, and the toll on the aircraft was showing. The AH-64A attack helicopter had been in the Army inventory for 3 years, but had never been pushed this hard until combat operations had started. Nor had the pilots been pushed this hard. Flying the helicopter in training exercises and flying the aircraft in combat presented significantly different stress levels, levels not experienced by this younger generation of helicopter pilots. Some of the old Vietnam-era pilots had experienced this level of stress, but they were few and far between, as those that had stayed in the Army after Vietnam were eligible for retirement, and many had already retired from the Army. Those that were still on active duty were most likely not qualified in this new attack helicopter. Okay, listen up, Lieutenant Colonel Bodine said, looking over his group of pilots and crews. Tomorrow is a down day. Smiles and small cheers could be heard. Don't get your hopes up. We have a down day because we have one of those desert dust storms we've heard about and seen in the old movies. Looks of wonder were exchanged between the pilots. Sir, what old movies? One of the younger pilots asked. You know the Jimmy Stewart movie, Flight of the Phoenix, where he's a pilot and crashes in the desert? It was a hit in 1965, and had this scene where a sandstorm blows in and covers them. Sir, I wasn't born until 1968. Wasn't there a sandstorm in Star Wars? What movie had sandstorms isn't the point. The point is that it's going to get very nasty around here, and you all need to be sure you have a mask over your nose and mouth. Wear goggles if you have them, and find a place to just hunker down and sleep if you can. If you get up to go piss, don't go far, as you'll probably have difficulty finding your way back, Bodine said. How bad can it get that we would get lost going to take a piss? A senior NCO asked. Sergeant, you'll be lucky if you can see 5 feet in front of you, I'm told. I can't imagine that, but we'll see. Make sure you all have 2 liters of water with you before it hits us. Any questions? Bodine asked. Sir, how long will we be down? Another pilot asked. I'm told the storm will last 18 to 24 hours. We'll need time after to check over each aircraft and clean out the sand. So you might get 2 days. Make the best of it. Any other questions? He paused. Okay then, get some rest. The morning sun came up as pretty as ever. The temperature was even pleasant, and in fact it had been a bit cool the night before, requiring everyone to wrap up in their poncho and poncho liner if they didn't have a sleeping bag. Pilots were creatures of comfort, not to the extent of their Air Force counterparts, but well above the level of the infantry soldier. Unfortunately, the AH-64A attack helicopter didn't have a lot of room for pilot comfort items. Those went into any cubbyhole the pilots could find. Attack pilots traveled light as a result. Several of the pilots had moved outside to enjoy the morning sun and pleasant temperature while they sipped their coffee made on a can filled with sand and some JP4 aviation gas. Made a pretty good little stove. Breakfast was a cold MRE, whatever one drew. With luck, a pilot would draw scrambled eggs and bacon and somehow be able to heat it. Luckless pilots drew lima beans and ham. Hot or cold, that tasted like crap. Some were reading well-worn letters from home, and others were writing letters home. Damn, it would be nice if we could talk to our wives and let them know how we're doing. Sally says the TV is covering a lot of stuff, but not specifically about our unit, or where anyone is except to say in the desert, Phil complained. You can damn well bet the Remps are talking to their wives. I know for a fact that the battalion chaplain was talking to his wife almost daily back in Oman. Official business, he would say, Pete said, holding his hands up and imitating quotation marks. As the pilot sat making small talk, the morning sun continued its path, but the temperature didn't rise noticeably. A few of the pilots had a card game going when a puff of breeze scattered the cards. Grabbing for the loose cards, Phil looked up. Holy shit, he said, his face in awe of what was coming. Guys, I think we best get inside, now. They all turned to see what he was looking at. A wall of sand was approaching rapidly. It appeared to be a couple of 1,000 feet high, but they couldn't tell for sure, as the leading edge at the top was closer than the main body. They did know it was a solid wall of sand, however. The realization of what was about to happen hit them all at the same time, and the pilots sprinted to the shelter of the building. Entering, they closed all the doors and windows. That should keep it out, Pete said as he closed the last window. No one said anything. There was no doubt in anyone's mind when the wall of sand hit. The doors and windows shook with the wind, which built very quickly to over 30 miles an hour. Almost immediately, sand began swirling around inside the room. Jet streams of sand entered through every nook, crack, and cranny around the doors and windows. Soon, everyone was wearing a mask and covered their heads under their poncho and liner. Minutes ticked into hours with no relief. No one wanted to get up to go piss. If they did, they used a trash can that the commander had placed in the room just for the purpose. Even then, it was painful to get up and go to it. No one was about to open the door and go outside. Once it got dark, no one bothered to light a light, as no one had a need for one, and no one wanted to come out from under their poncho. The fortunate ones went to sleep, and eventually everyone slept. At first light, the storm had not abated. By this time, everyone was covered in a fine layer of sand, and some even had piles on their ponchos. Nasal passages were clogged with sand that had clung to nasal hair. Water from water bottles had a muddy taste to it. Some used their bottled water to wash out the sand that had settled in their lower eyelids during the night. Their eyes were red from the irritation. Lieutenant Colonel Bodine lay under his poncho liner, with his mask covering his nose and mouth. How much longer is this shit going to keep up? He wondered. How much of this fucking sand is the dust covers on the engines going to keep out? We're going to have to flush the engines and inspect rotor blades after this. The maintenance guys will be working for 20 hours. Pilots are going to have to get out there and give them a hand cleaning this crap. And all the while, the Iraqis will have clear sky before us and be running north before we can even think about getting off the ground. Damn it. Chapter 45. Continue the attack. 9 May 1991, CENTCOM HQ, Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. As soon as Riyadh was liberated by the 24th Mechanized Division, CENTCOM moved from Muscat. They arrived just ahead of the sandstorm, that was bearing down on the eastern side of the country, playing havoc with everything. Even in the city, dust managed to find its way through the slightest of openings, a fine coating of sand-layered furniture, food, and drinks. As frustrating as it was, the CENTCOM staff knew it must be miserable for the soldiers, Marines, and airmen that were enduring it outside. They also knew not to openly complain about it in front of General Schwarzkopf, unless they wanted to see him rise to his nickname of Stormin' Norman. The staff had determined that some adjustments had to be made in the attack plan. This storm, and the fact that the enemy has a vote in any plan developed, called for some modifications. They were ready to run it by the general and get his approval to issue the orders for the changes. "Good morning, sir," General O'Donnell, the G2 intelligence officer, said. "What's so damn good about it? Is that your weather report for today?" Schwarzkopf asked. "Afraid not, sir. As for the weather, this will continue to blow until late this evening, and then be done. Around midnight, we should see a clearing sky. Tomorrow, temperatures will be back to normal for this time of year. High 90s to 100 degrees. "Wonderful," was Schwarzkopf's only sarcastic comment. "Sir, the enemy has used this sandstorm as cover for his retreat. Satellite imagery shows that he's pulling back to Kuwait and continuing to build his defenses there. Not previously found before is the fact that, despite his naval losses, he's placed sea mines all along the coast of Kuwait. The minefield is rather extensive, being about 150 miles long and 50 miles wide. It's laid in 3 belts, about 10 miles between belts," O'Donnell explained. "Why the hell did we not find this sooner?" Schwarzkopf asked. "Sir, previously use of the satellite time to look for sea mines had very low priority, and the folks in DC weren't looking for them." Schwarzkopf jotted down a note. "Okay," was all he said. "Sir, satellite imagery shows a large number of air defense missile sites in both Kuwait and Iraqi. We suspect that he's pulling back to get his forces under this umbrella, as his air force hasn't been able to maintain or gain air superiority or even parity. Our air campaign is mauling him badly, and we believe he's thinking that by moving under this umbrella, he might feel some relief. The umbrella contains SA-2, SA-3, SA-6, SA-8, SA-10, and SA-300 missiles, as well as the usual SA-9 that's found at the regimental level. The 5-sided palace is working up detail locations and overlays of the air defense threat, to include radar locations, and will get that to us in the coming days. They've put a priority on that," O'Donnell explained. "What they call a priority, I sometimes call a delay. If you need me to energize them in getting that information, you let me know," Schwarzkopf directed. "The old man is definitely in a foul mood this morning," O'Donnell thought, as he prepared to provide the next bit of news. Iraqi ground forces continue to move north, taking advantage of us being under this sandstorm while they're almost out of it. The 2I Iraqi Corps is moving back into the western desert. The IV Iraqi Corps has moved back to KKMC, and it appears they're continuing to move to Wadi al-Batten and along the Iraq-Kuwait border region. The 2nd Republican Guard Corps is being refitted and is moving into western Kuwait, and the 1st Republican Guard Corps has been in southeastern Kuwait for some time now. The 7 Iraqi Corps has a screen line south of Kuwait, and we believe that once all Iraqi forces have passed through him, we'll see him withdraw back into Kuwait as well. We might see him take the 1st Republican Guard Corps position, with the 1st Republican Guard Corps assuming the role of a reserve force," O'Donnell explained. "What about his Air Force? How bad have we hurt them?" "Sir, they've moved all their aircraft back into Iraq. They're staging out of several bases. He has 6 major military airfields, another 25 backup airfields, and 16 other lesser airfields. His air defense around each is formidable, and he has over 200 hardened shelters for this fighter aircraft," O'Donnell explained. "Where are they?" Schwarzkopf asked. In anticipation of the question, a map was projected on the screen. "Sir, the main bases are Basra, Kirkuk, Mosul, Rashid, Tikrit, Ash Shwaiba, and Al-Iskandariya. O'Donnell indicated, pointing to each on the map. Of particular interest, sir, is this airfield in Talil. This is a major airfield with hardened bunkers for aircraft and personnel. More important, however, is the fact that Saddam's major chemical biological laboratory is located in Salman Pak. But there's a lab adjacent to this airfield in Talil. He doesn't store his chemical weapons there. They're stored north of there in a 5-by-6 kilometer ammunition dump here, south of An-Nasariya. O'Donnell pointed on the map. His chemical weapons production facility is in Samara, 60 miles north of Ramadi. Have we seen any indicators that he's planning on using his chemical weapons? General Schwarzkopf asked. No, sir. We had a report that some chemical weapon, mustard gas, I believe the report said, was used earlier in the Battle of Medina Ridge, but we suspect now that may have been a false report. We've found that a large concentration of sheep shit will trigger the chemical detectors, and think that might be what happened there, O'Donnell explained, to the chuckles of the audience. General Schwarzkopf wrote another note before he asked, Anything else, General? No, sir, that concludes my portion. I will be followed by General Schless, O'Donnell said, picking up some notes and moving aside for General Schless. General Schless took the podium and called for the first slide. Morning, sir. Our task organization remains the same. In the past 24 hours, offensive operations have halted due to the current weather conditions. Airborne is consolidating in Tabuk. Seft Corps is occupying from Riyadh to Buraida. The Marines, along with 1st British, have covered down on the line from Al-Kharj to Al-Holian, and the 3 Corps from Al-Holian to the coast, with the host nation forces on the coast. When the weather clears and on order, all units know to continue to move north. Gentlemen, Schwarzkopf interrupted, I've spoken with the king, and we're going to make a few changes in the task organization. As he invoked the name of the king, they all suspected some political pressure had come into play. We're standing up another corps headquarters under the command of the Saudis, and it'll consist of the Saudi Mechanized Brigade, the Northern Omani Brigade, the UAE Mechanized Battalion, and Task Forces Othman, Abu Bakr, and Tariq. This will be known as Joint Forces Command East. They will remain along the coast and drive to take Kuwait City. On their left flank, I want the 2 Marine divisions, hence known as Marine Central Command. 1st British will shift and come under 7 Corps, along with 1st Cavalry Division. 3 Corps will retain the 50th Armored Division, along with the 3rd and 4th Egyptian Divisions, and the Saudi-Kuwait Joint Task Force Sa'al and Muthana, and will be known as Joint Forces Command North. It will be on the left flank of the Marine Central Command and the right flank for the 7 Corps. The 7 Corps will give up the 24th Mech to Zointor Airborne Corps. 7 Corps and Soront Airborne Corps will be under Army Central Command, Schwarzkopf stated. Horseholders were frantically writing notes as Schwarzkopf stood and walked over to the map. He picked up a pointer. I want Joint Forces Command East to cover from the coast to vicinity of Al-Wafra. Marine Central Command will cover from Al-Wafra to the elbow in the Kuwait border here, the general said, pointing to the almost 90-degree turn in the Kuwait border. Joint Forces Command north from the elbow to the border of Kuwait and Iraq. Army Central Command from the Kuwait-Iraq border west. This array gives us several options depending on what I'm told is our final objective. All right, you have the laydown. Now get back to me with the options for the plan, he said, placing the pointer down and heading for the door. Over his shoulder, he told the aide to have Lieutenant General Boomer come to his office. Excuse me, General, but you wanted to see me? General Boomer said, entering the office. Yeah, Walt, I want to bounce something off you. Please sit down, Schwarzkopf said, indicating a chair. You know about this minefield off the coast of Kuwait that the boys found? Sure do, big damn thing. Why? Well, we sure as hell can't run an amphib op through it, but I wonder if the Iraqis know that, Schwarzkopf said with a smile. I suppose if we ran some minesweepers up there and started operations, that may just scare the crap out of them, making them think that's what we're going to do. What you got in mind? Boomer asked. I'm thinking of doing just that. Run some minesweepers up there and move the Gator Navy up as well. Let them be seen and get it into the Iraqis' heads that we're going to do an amphibious assault in the vicinity of Kuwait City. How many divisions do you think they would position along the coast to oppose such a landing? Norm asked. Well, considering that they learned that one division in the UAE wasn't enough, I'll bet he'll hold 3 divisions along the coast just to oppose a landing, Boomer said. I was thinking the same thing. Might even place an armored division centrally for a reserve, Norm added. Let me get with the Gator Navy boys and work up something. We could really get into his head with this, Boomer said as he stood to leave. I'll have something for you next week if that's okay. That'll be great. Until then, General, Norm said with a smile. He loved screwing with the enemy's head. Chapter 46. Resume the offense. 2 May 1991. B Troop, 1st Squadron, 15th Cav. Al-Qalaba, Saudi Arabia. The sandstorm that racked the eastern portion of the county hadn't descended on the western side, much to everyone's joy. The 15th Airborne Corps was able to consolidate the forces in and around Tabuk. The aircraft and crews were dragging from a lack of sleep and overworked machines. Thus, the decision had been made to give them a down day for maintenance and crew rest. For the ground forces of the 28th and 29th Divisions, it was business as usual. Rearm, refuel, and get ready to move out. The 82nd Airborne Division was consolidating at the airport, their forces from the coast having come by truck overland to join those that had conducted the airborne assault of the airport. Okay, let's load up, Lieutenant Pyle yelled to his platoon, with their 4 M3 cavalry fighting vehicles. We're point, so let's move up, he told his driver, who engaged the vehicle and proceeded to move to the head of the 4-vehicle column. The rest of B Troop, 1 to 15 Cav, would be following about 300 meters behind them. What's the route, Lieutenant? Specialist Thompson asked. Lieutenant Pyle was new, having been transferred over from another unit. Thompson liked what he had seen so far, but this was his first experience going into Injun territory with the new platoon leader. We're going to follow Highway 15 and clear it, reporting roadblocks and mines. We're not coming back to Tabuk, it appears. As they cleared the cultivated farmland, they spread out, with 2 vehicles on each side of the road. Pyle was pleased to see a Cobra helicopter and scout aircraft ahead of them, flying an S pattern over the 2-lane asphalt road. Occasionally, they would come across a burned-out vehicle or a vehicle that had run out of gas. They didn't encounter any Iraqi soldiers, nor any that wished to be taken prisoner. Sheep still grazed on stubble grasses as their forefathers had for a few thousand years. Little changed with time in this part of the world. Silver Saber 2-1, Crossbow 3-2, over. Pyle recognized the call sign as that of the Cobra pilot. Crossbow 3-2, Silver Saber 2-1, over, Pyle replied. Saber, I'm going to have to break for fuel. My replacement, Crossbow 3-4, is about 30 minutes away and will join you. Good luck. Out. Thanks a lot for the heads up, Pyle thought, switching his microphone to intercom. Okay, heads up. The Cobra and Scout had to break station, so there are no eyes forward of us. He received an acknowledgement from each of his crew. He then notified each of his track commanders. They'd been moving down Highway 15 for a little over 2 hours and were 10 miles from Al-Qalaba, a wide spot in the road and the intersection of Highway 15 and Highway 80, which continued on to Sakaka, right where they were going. 6 miles from Al-Qalaba, the highway went through a small pass between 2 escarpments. The southern escarpment could easily be bypassed to the south. Pyle determined that this looked like an ideal location for an ambush, and so approached cautiously. Saber 2-2-2-1, he called his platoon sergeant, who was on the north side of the road with the other Cav vehicle. Go, 2-1, came over the headphones. 2-2, let's check out these 2 escarpments and make sure Abdul isn't setting an ambush. Over, Pyle instructed. Roger, we're going to dismount and move out, the platoon sergeant transmitted. Roger, 2-2, we'll do the same. Stay in contract, Pyle said. Roger, 2-2 out. Pyle switched to intercom. Okay, guys, let's dismount and check this area out, he ordered his soldiers. The backs of the 2 Cav fighting vehicles opened, and 6 scout soldiers exited each vehicle. The gunner and driver, as well as the track commander, remained in the vehicles to provide overwatching fire if it became necessary. As Pyle dismounted as well, Sergeant Blair, the gunner, took over as the track commander. Blair had been promoted once the unit had been activated, as he had more experience than others, and it was recent experience as he'd only been out of the army a couple of months when they were called up. Fortunately, only a few guys had been injured, and no one had been killed. As almost everyone in his guard unit was from the same town, they were a pretty tight-knit group. They still referred to the company commander as Sheriff. Pyle was leading the 12 scouts who had fanned out, placing about 10 meters between each man. No point in having one hand grenade or machine gun burst take out more than one man. Suddenly, a scout on the left flank dropped to his knee and raised his hand with a closed fist. Everyone dropped to a knee and became very alert. Pyle remained in a low crouch and made his way over to the soldier. "What you got?" Pyle asked in a whisper. "Listen, sir," the young scout said, and pointed towards the edge of the escarpment overlooking the road. Waiting, Pyle dropped to all four and began a slow crawl to the edge when he heard the sound of a rifle bolt slamming around into a chamber. A chill ran down his back. Then he heard the voices. He had no idea what was being said, but it wasn't in English, and that meant caution was required. Pyle looked over his shoulder and saw that everyone was watching him. Good. They're paying attention. He raised his arm and spun it in a circular motion. Everyone began coming to him in a crouched walk and took a knee when they arrived. No one said anything. They didn't need to, as they all could hear the Iraqi soldiers just over the edge. Using hand signals, Pyle communicated what he wanted done, and everyone separated into groups of 2 along the escarpment. On Pyle's signal, each man withdrew a hand grenade and pulled the pin. Again, on Pyle's signal, the grenades were dropped over the edge. For the first 2 seconds, nothing was heard from the Iraqis. Then the shouting started as realization set in. 3 seconds later, a series of explosions went off. Pyle and his men stood and began spraying the Iraqi position with automatic weapons. As each man emptied their magazine, they stopped shooting and replaced the magazine but didn't shoot. Few could have lived through that onslaught, and if they did, they would be in no condition to fight. "Okay, stay on your toes, but let's move down and see what we hit. Johnson and Travis, go first and we'll cover," Pyle directed. The 2 soldiers moved cautiously over the edge of the escarpment, while others trained their weapons on the lifeless Iraqi soldiers. Pyle's radio came to life. 2-1? 2-2, over. 2-2, 2-1, go ahead. "I heard some music over there. Everyone okay?" the platoon sergeant asked. "We all good. Have one unfriendly position taken out. Squad size with automatic weapons and suitcase anti-tank rockets. How's the hunting over there?" 2-1, we have indications they were here but have left maybe 3 hours ago. "Roger, let's load up and head to the checkpoint." "Roger, we'll join you on the road. 2-2 out." Another 5 miles and we can wait for everyone else while someone else takes point, Pyle thought. Al-Qalaba might have been a wide spot in the road, but it was a welcome relief point at least for Troop B. This was a long ride in the UH-60. For almost an hour, half the soldiers of 327th Infantry Battalion, along with half of the 1st Brigade, 101st Airborne Division, had been in the aircraft. Their destination was Fob Bastogne, which they were to establish 120 miles northeast of Tabuk, at an oasis known as Al-Hawi. All indications were that there had been some mining or oil drilling in the area. Accompanying the UH-60 troop lift aircraft, there were CH-47s with sling loads of vehicles, fuel blivets, and 105mm howitzers. This would be the first of 2 lifts coming. Once the first lift touched down, they would be on their own for 3 hours before the next lift arrived. As the Iraqis were retreating, the powers that be felt that this wasn't a long period of time for the force. The purpose of the FOB, as it had been explained to the soldiers by Lieutenant Colonel Corey, was to provide a refueling point for the AH-64 attack helicopters in support of the ground forces coming up Highway 80, and to repel any Iraqi forces attempting to move against FOB Bastogne. 2 minutes, the crew chief yelled above the pounding of the rotor blades and the scream of the turbine engines. A soldier on each side pulled the cargo doors back quickly as the aircraft flared for its landing on the paved road. As the front wheels touched, Lieutenant Colonel Corey and the other 14 soldiers bailed out and assumed a prone position next to the aircraft, weapons pointing out from behind their rucksacks. Battle Force 6, Gladiator 6 moving out, the Alpha Company commander, Captain Mulford, reported. Mulford had crossed swords with the colonel over one major point. Mulford's RTO was the worst in the battalion and was seldom by his radio to answer when the colonel called. Corey had gone so far as to relieve Mulford's RTO and made Mulford carry the radio himself. After a few weeks of that, Mulford had found a reliable RTO, and things had improved significantly in their relationship. Roger. Break. All Battle Force elements, move out. Notify me when you've secured your objectives. Battle Force 6 out. Turning to his 2 RTOs, Specialist Mankin and Specialist King, Corey asked, "Are you 2 ready to move yet?" "Sir, we're just waiting on you," Mankin said. Mankin was a very good RTO, as was King, but both liked to push it to the edge with the colonel. The colonel would dish it out just as well in return, especially if it did go over the line. If both hadn't been as good as they were, the colonel would have changed them out long ago. Truth was, he liked the banter with them. They were both 19, and Corey was 44. He had to work at keeping up with them physically, and seldom did he falter, they noted. "The old man is in pretty damn good shape for his age," was stated on more than one occasion when they were with their fellow soldiers. "Okay, let's move out and hook up with the S-3. He should be heading for that cluster of buildings to the north," Corey said, and they began to walk that way when the first shot could be heard. They stopped and dropped to a knee. "Did you hear that shot?" Corey asked. "Yes, sir, but that didn't sound like an AK or a PKM," King said, looking around. "Sir, Gladiator 6 is calling for you," Mankin said, handing the hand mic to Corey. "Gladiator 6, Battle Force 6. "Battle Force 6, Gladiator 6. We have a sniper. 1 man down. Need medevac. Over." "Roger, how bad?" "Bad. Chest wound. Haven't identified the sniper's location, but he's east of my location. Over." Without being told, King was on the brigade command frequency requesting a medevac aircraft. "Roger, medevac has been notified. Break, Scout 1, Battle Force 6, over." "Battle Force 6, I monitored and am looking," the scout platoon leader reported. The scout platoon had 2 snipers of their own who were very good at what they did. The scout platoon had been inserted the night before, 6 kilometers away, along with the scout platoons from the other battalions, each in the respective battalion sector. Lieutenant Stahl had pushed the platoon out in 2 locations to form a perimeter to the east and south of the battalion sector. He'd established a central position for himself from which he could communicate with his teams and the battalion commander. As soon as the shot was heard, Stahl knew what was going down. "Team 1, any sign?" Stahl asked the first team. "Negative, not in my sector." "Team 2, any sign?" "Wait 1. He's in our sector, and we're looking now." Stahl waited. 5 minutes later, the team leader reported. "Scout 1, Team 2, We have his location. He's moving around and kicking up some dust about 300 yards from my location." "Roger, take him out as soon as you can," Stahl ordered. That wasn't necessary, as he knew they would. Specialist Daniels and his spotter, Specialist Alexander, had been working together for 2 years now. They were a good team, and either could be the shooter or the spotter. In fact, they were so confident in each other's ability that they frequently swapped positions for a day or so. "There's a rise at 300 yards with 2 rocks sticking up like a pair of tits," Alexander said, lying prone behind his spotting scope. "Have you got that?" he asked Daniels, who looked through his rifle scope. Daniels' weapon was the newly issued M24 rifle, manufactured by Remington Arms. It chambered a 7.62 mm round, but these rounds weren't pulled off a machine gun belt, but specific match ammunition, M118LR long-range 175-grain bullets. The scope was a loopholed Ultra M3A 10-inch-on-42 fixed power scope. On the range, Daniels could place 5 rounds in the center of the target at 800 yards and 4 out of 5 rounds at 1,000 yards. "Yeah, I see it," Daniels replied. "Okay, come right 50 meters and you'll see a dip in the ridge. 10 feet below that dip is a bush. He's at the base of the bush. See him?" Alexander asked. "Oh yeah. Hello, Abdullah. Today you meet 40 virgins in paradise," Daniels said as he studied the target and noted the wind, which was negligible and not a factor today. "Okay, here goes," Daniels said. He took a deep breath and then released half of it, his trigger finger slowly applying pressure to the trigger. At some point, the trigger tripped the firing pin inside the bolt, and the round exploded out the barrel at a speed of 2,580 feet per second. As Alexander watched, he couldn't see the bullet, but he could see the air move as the bullet passed through heat waves on the desert floor. The spray of red at the end of the bullet's flight told him that Daniels had racked up another kill. Once the remainder of the battalion was in the phobe, they would walk out and examine the kill. Chapter 47. Durraki. 15 May 1991. Iraqi 3rd Squadron, Shaiba Air Base, Basra, Iraq. Major Vitaly Popkov sat across the table from his friend, Major Konstantin Kostya Ayushiev. The 2 men were locked in a test of will and wit. Popkov studied his friend's eyes, wondering how he would attack. After what felt like hours, Kostya slapped a queen of spades on the table. Popkov defended with the king of spades. Kostya came back with the king of hearts. Again, Popkov was able to edge out his friend, this time with the ace of hearts. With the ace in play, Kostya made his next attack with the ace of spades. Popkov defended with a trump card, the 7 of diamonds. Kostya halted his attack, and play moved across the table. Popkov lashed out with the ace of clubs, hoping to draw out any of Kostya's trump cards. The move worked as Kostya defended with the 8 of diamonds. Popkov looked at his cards. With 2 trump cards left, he felt confident that he had the game in hand. Each player was down to their final 2 cards. Popkov looked around the room at his squad mates. "I don't know about you, Kostya, but I really like my cards," said Popkov. Everyone in the room knew what would happen next. Popkov was about to make a wager. "Just play your next card, idiot. You're wasting time." No, hear me out. These 2 cards," he waved the cards in his hand, "are unbeatable." Kostya rolled his eyes. "Okay, I'll bite. What do you want?" asked the pilot. "It's not about what I want. It's about what I don't want," replied Popkov. "You're impossible, Vitaly. Get to the point," said one of the onlooking pilots. "I don't want to submit my after-action report for our next mission. If I win this hand, Kostya will write it up for me." He shifted his gaze to Kostya. "If you somehow defeat my unbeatable cards, I'll cover you for the rest of the week." Kostya turned it over in his mind. He looked at his cards. He had 1 more trump, the queen of diamonds. Next to that, he had a relatively weak 10 of spades. It wasn't great, but it could be worse. In the end, he decided, it wasn't about the cards. It was about the challenge. He would rather lose the bet than have Popkov calling him a coward, even in jest. "Fine. If it'll speed up your play, I'll take your bet." Popkov played the 9 of diamonds, which forced Kostya to burn the queen. Popkov then hesitated before dropping his final card, the 10 of diamonds. "Shit!" said Kostya, knowing that he couldn't beat that card. The room burst out with laughter and cries of "Durak!", the Russian word for fool for which the game was named. "Kostya, let's go for a walk," said Popkov once the room quieted. "We can go over the format I like to use in these reports." As soon as the two had left the barracks, Popkov apologized to his friend. "I know that wasn't particularly fair in there, but the men needed a diversion, and I thought I'd lighten the mood." "Oh, I don't mind. I'm always up for some theater, as long as it's for a good cause." "With our new accommodations here, I think improving morale definitely qualifies as a good cause." The Iraqi Air Force had moved the squadron to Shaiba Air Base in Iraq, just north of the Kuwaiti-Iraqi border. It wasn't too primitive by combat pilot standards, but the men had gotten a bit too accustomed to the facilities in Saudi Arabia and the UAE. "Yes, our new home isn't exactly up to the standard of our old base, is it? And it's not just the facilities, Kostya. It's the rationale behind the move." Popkov looked around to ensure they were alone. "No matter what our Iraqi minders say, there's no hiding it from the men. We're losing this war." "It would seem so," replied Kostya. "We can no longer guarantee air superiority outside of our SAM coverage. That much is obvious. The question is, what comes next? How do they turn this around? And more importantly, how long will we be a part of that turnaround?" "You think that Moscow will pull us out of here?" asked Popkov. "I don't think they'll have a choice. Right now we're an incredibly valuable asset. We're experienced combat pilots. If they leave us here in a losing effort, how many of us will remain to return and pass on our knowledge to the rest of the VVS?" As if on cue, the two men heard the distant wail of air raid sirens. "Shit! Let's go!" said Popkov, as he raced to get to one of the airbase's fortified bomb shelters. In the distance, he could see the ready fighters screaming down the runway, and he wished that he were flying instead of running. The two pilots made it into an underground shelter just as the first of the bombs fell. They sat out the attack in the shelter, impotent, unable to do anything except exist. After 10 minutes that stretched on into what felt like hours, the all-clear sounded, letting them know it was safe to return to the surface. "My God," said Kostya as they emerged. The entire airfield was glowing with the fires from the Pole facility off to the northeast. Popkov looked to the revetments where the squadron's MiG-29 fighters were parked. His heart sank as he saw smoke and fire rising from the storage pens. Unfortunately, unlike some of their other airfields, Shaiba didn't have any hardened shelters. From the wide swath of destruction, Popkov concluded that they must have been hit by a massive amount of cluster munitions. The thousands of tiny bomblets would tear through the unprotected planes. He had no idea what had ignited the POL facility, but at this point, what did it matter? "I think this answers our question, my friend. I do believe that we are going home," said Popkov, just as Kostya was reaching the same conclusion.
Thank you for watching our video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you'll never miss another video.
In the meantime, we have plenty of reading material to keep you busy. You can find it all on our website, frontlinepublishinginc.com.